tuned in with me. I know you all are here with me. So we're gonna get right to what we need to get into. And when we get to that, you know how it goes. We give you some news, some updates, we give you scores, and then we get into the meat of the show. So we got a couple things to talk about today. Some things that I feel like I need to express some opinions on or some thoughts on, if you will, because you know what they say about opinions. Everybody has one. So we'll talk about that, when we get to what we get to. But I also am going to have some announcements for you today, and you'll like the announcements. They're pretty good announcements. They are really, actually, they're really good announcements, and you'll enjoy the announcements that we have. Shout out to everybody that attended the Dell last night. I think it was Fantasia and Stokely last night. We had, we do so much here at Heat 100 that I sometimes lose track of who's here and who's there and whatever day it is. But nonetheless, I'm sure another great show yesterday or last night at the Dell East, and still some stuff coming up because this coming Sunday, 28th, got the Lady B hip hop show, the old school hip hop show, which is always a great show. I usually try to get to that show just about every year when it comes, but I haven't gotten there in a couple years. And you know how we do. The pandemic and all of that kind of stuff had us out and not being able to get out. So we're back, and I will definitely be in the building for that show. So let's get into what we need to get into today so we can get this thing cracking and get it rolling on this beautiful Monday morning. So we are going to give you right now, we're going to get into some news and some updates. And one of the updates is concerning Britney Griner. Mark Brown, thanks for tuning in. And like I say, folks, you know what I say. When you tune in, I will acknowledge you when I see you. But if you feel like you need to leave a comment, leave some comments, and I'll read as many comments as I can on air. And I will acknowledge as many as I can on air, as long as it doesn't hinder what I'm doing or help or doesn't break my thought process. So it may not be immediate, but it will definitely be gotten to. The final DeShaun Watson plaintiff rejected her settlement offer due to the lack of remorse. We are going to talk about that in a little bit. So just work with me and ride the wave a little bit, and we'll get to that. A Utah judge reverses the law banning transgender kids from sports. So if you don't know much about this, initially there was this big thing about transgender young people playing in sports, and a lot of people felt like they had an unfair advantage. And a lot of this could be traced back to the swimmer that I mentioned to you a little while back from University of Penn, who is transgender. And what the fear is that the competitiveness would change, the competition rather would change, the effectiveness would change. And again, they fear that some of these transgender persons would have an unfair advantage in their respective sport. So step up for Utah now that the judge reverses the law banning transgender kids from sports. A report that the LeBron deal could re-energize the Kyrie Irving trade talks. We'll see what happens. The Lakers are right now in a way, I won't call them a mess like I call the Nets a mess, but they're in a way, and they are right now feeling the brunt of the Russell Westbrook trade, where just to give you a little of the backstory, they traded away a lot of young talent, ended up with Russell Westbrook from the Washington Wizards, and apparently it is not working the way that they expected it to work. I mentioned a stat on Thursday where the Lakers were a better team, ironically, with Russell Westbrook on the court and LeBron not on the court. But LeBron is now the figurehead, the face of the Lakers. He is the guy. He just signed a 2-year, $97 million extension, so he is the guy. So they are still talking and pondering what is going to become of Russell Westbrook. Will he continue to be a Laker, or will something happen and he ultimately gets traded elsewhere? Alexander Usyk defeats Anthony Joshua by a split decision to retain the WBA, the WBO, and the IBF heavyweight titles. Next on his list, apparently reports are out that he wants to fight, I forget his name, but he wants to get another fight, and you know who that is, who he wants to fight. Tiger Woods and Rory McIlroy are leading efforts to create the PGA Tour circuit with a $20 million purses, and this is expected to be 18 events. I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and this is also going with the back and forth with the competition between the PGA and the LIV golf circuit. The Bucks lose guard Stinney to a torn ACL and MCL. Horace Grant's Bulls title rings go up for auction. Udonis Haslem is set to return for his 20th season. And also reports the NFL has fined Jets linebacker after the controversial hit on Jalen Hurts in the preseason game last week. The Yankees retire O'Neal's number 21 jersey and also boo general manager Cashman. The last thing I want to get to is the Dennis Rodman is set to visit Russia to speak with officials and Britney Griner to possibly seek her release from prison in Russia. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a bit, so just bear with me on that, if you will. Right now, we're going to get you some scores from yesterday. We got some MLB scores, and we got some WNBA playoffs and some preseason football. We are going to start with the Major League Baseball scores from Sunday, August 21st, 2022. The Brewers outlast the Cubs 5-2. The Astros get by the Braves 5-4. The Mariners fall to the A's 5-3. The Mets get by, just edge out the Phils 10-9. Mr. Terrell, homie, thanks for tuning in, good brother. The Angels get blanked by the Tigers 4-0. The Red Sox fall to the Orioles 5-3. The Royals just couldn't get enough. They fall to the Rays 3-2. The White Sox and the Guardians game was postponed. The Reds get past the Pirates in Pittsburgh 9-5. The Rangers blank the Twins 7-0. The Cardinals get by the Diamondbacks 6-4. In 11 innings, the Giants just get by the Colorado Rockies 9-8. The Nationals fall to the Padres 2-1. And the Dodgers smack up a little bit and beat up a little bit on the Marlins 10-3. In the WNBA playoffs, the Dallas Wings defeat the Sun 89-79, tying that series at one game apiece. Let's see. And the Mystics and the Storm. The Mystics fall 97-84. The Storm handle business and they take that series. In NFL preseason football yesterday, the Ravens beat the Cardinals 24-17. The Eagles get by the Browns 21-20. And the Bengals fall to the Giants 25-22. I will give you schedules for some of those sports for Major League Baseball for today, for WNBA Tuesday, and then there's one NFL preseason game also today on Monday Night Football. So the first point that I gave you in my news and updates this morning was in reference to one of the DeShaun Watson plaintiffs who rejected the settlement. And as you know, DeShaun Watson settled about 24 of those 20 whatever. I mean, like, the numbers kept going up, so I kind of lost track of how many it was totally. But I know somewhere between 24 and like 26 or whatever. But nonetheless, he settled a bunch of the suits. And then there was the last one where this lady, this plaintiff, felt that there was no remorse from DeShaun Watson. And after I saw that, of course, I do what I do. I started doing some research, and I found that this was somewhat true, if you will. I believe it was true, or there is some truth to it, because everywhere I looked, I started to see questions about his remorse and how he felt about the situation. And then I go to a site that I trust with a lot of information that I bring to you guys. But you know, I always go through this information first and bring it to you with my points of view in it. And this article, it starts out and it says, DeShaun Watson has never shown remorse for serial sexual misconduct allegations. And we do know that they always start out as allegations. We do know that, definitely. But we also got the storyline where it finally came out that he was initially suspended for 6 games. The talk was that John Cameron, thanks for tuning in, good brother. There was also talk in the initial stages that the NFL would not appeal. Amazing how things turn and things get flipped. The NFL did appeal that first suspension of the 6 games and ultimately handed down an 11-game suspension, a $5 million fine, and ordered him to go to counseling. Okay, now there is a storyline here, and I'm going to get to that very, very soon. But I'm sure some of you can only imagine and think about what it is. And if you remember what some of the things we said on Thursday, we were at the Drake, we were talking about this a little bit, but there is a line of gain, if you will, for the NFL in this story. And like I said, I'll get to that in just a short bit. So in all of this, I was one from the beginning and all throughout saying that if the numbers kept rising and this many people were being added or getting added into the suit as being plaintiffs, that there was some type of truth to some things that went on. And again, us on the outside looking in, we'll arguably never know what truly happened. We can only know what we are being given by reports from the media, such as myself and other facets of media. But it led me to believe that there was some truth to a lot of these events. Then we got to the point where he began to, well, they went through the stages, and then it got the criminal cases or the criminal charges got somewhat dropped down to civil cases. Civil cases began to get settled out of court, which means people were getting paid off. We got to this last plaintiff, and she did not want to take the payoff because she didn't feel the remorse. Okay, so we get to the point where, like I said, if there's 24 civil lawsuits, there has to be some truth to it. It's no doubt in my mind that there is some truth to it at this point. One of the things that have people feeling that he is not remorseful is one of the things that he said, and it says DeShaun Watson on why he accepted a settlement if he claims he's innocent. And I quote, "I've always been able to stand on my innocence and always said I never assaulted or disrespected anyone. But at the same point, I have to continue to push forward with my life and career." End quote. So let's talk about that statement for a little bit while we're here. And that it reads like his concern is more with moving forward in his career. His concern is his career. So you could easily argue that he's being a little selfish in this statement, and then you begin to feel what people are saying about him not being remorseful in this situation. It says nothing about what he did or what he was alleged or what he was accused of, rather. He just basically said he's always stood on his innocence and he never disrespected anybody and yada yada yada, and he wants to continue, and he has to continue to push forward on his life and his career. I get that. I understand. That's always the case. You are, whatever happens in life, you go through trials and tribulations and then you move on. You know, bumps in the road, things of that nature. You get to them, you handle them successfully or unsuccessfully, whatever the case may be, and then you move on. So that's a given. Okay, with him, with people in general, in any type of situation that would want to push forward with my life. But for him to come out and say it initially leads you to believe that his focus is elsewhere. He also goes on and it says, why is he apologizing then? I quote, "For everybody that was affected by this situation, There were a lot of people that were triggered. This is from Mike Garofalo. He also says that Watson refusing to accept his accountability or show remorse is nothing new. The arbiter judge made note of Watson's lack of remorse to the women he abused. His comments following the final ruling show how obtuse he has been to the whole situation. So, here we go. And people, if you're tuned in, please, if you have anything to say, feel free excuse me, to chime in. And here we go. DeShaun Watson's sexual assault allegations explained. Quote, I want to say that I'm truly sorry to all the women that I've impacted in this situation. This is what he said during an interview. Okay. It sure doesn't seem like he really means it. Okay, so you would have to see that interview, whatever, and you could get it. But the settlement only means that Watson is ending the legal process and has nothing to do with an admission of guilt. So of course we know now that he's never going to admit that he did something. He's never going to do it because of the stage of where we are. Now, getting to this point that I wanted to mention to you, and I wanted to bring this up, and it came up quicker than what I expected, but he is now scheduled to make his debut for the Cleveland Browns in Week 12. Ironically, that game in Week 12 is against the Houston Texans, his former team. You can very easily argue and debate that this is not by accident. And this is exactly what I was alluding to when I said that there's a game in it for the NFL. You think about a situation like this, and you think about this particular type of game, it will definitely drive people to want to see this game. And just imagine the build-up the week before, leading up to that game. I think that game is on a Sunday, but yeah, it is a Sunday. And imagine the build-up, the workup for that game coming, and you got DeShaun Watson, who didn't play for the Texans last year, went through all of this stuff in the offseason. Now he comes back and he's playing the Texans in Week 12, which I say is beneficial for the NFL. Like I said, the advertising, the ratings, like I said, basically the build up for this week. So like this week, this game could be arguably flexed to national TV. I don't know if it was scheduled to be on national TV or not, but it could very easily be flexed to national TV for all of these reasons. You've got the disgruntled employee who turns into a person who's accused of sexual misconduct, who is now apparently showing little or no remorse, and he comes back to face his old team. Hasn't played in a year, and we can say a year and a half or a season and a half. And the build-up, you can almost feel it now, where fans and media members will be looking to see what's the reaction from the Texans crowd, the fans there, the organization. How will he perform on this particular day after being out for this long period of time? He has to stop practicing on the 30th because of the suspension, which goes into Week 11. So he can practice now up until the 30th. So he's got about another week where he can practice with the team. And then after that, he has to stop because they were jumping in to the regular season, and he's suspended. It also says that both DeShaun Watson and the NFL deserve to be viewed with cynicism for how this situation played out. I realize a lot of times that we talk about, and I've always told you about the NFL, and I always talk about the billion-dollar conglomerate that it is, where they are going to protect their house, and they are going to benefit from whatever situation they can profit or benefit from. So in this situation, it's very arguable that they could do both. They will benefit definitely, but they could also profit from the situation, like we said, with the ratings, with the lead up to this, the build up. TV ratings will bring some profit to the NFL and all of that kind of stuff. The publicity and things will be set up for the NFL to be right in the mix and be successful in this situation. So again, he settled 24 out of 25 and counting civil suits. The Texans settled another 30 civil suits, and Watson is accepting banishment from the NFL until mid-November, like I mentioned to you, with the $5 million fine. But he still thinks that he did nothing wrong. Crazy, right? He won't play in any other preseason games. Like I said, he has to end practice on the 30th, and again in week 13 or week 12, whatever it is exactly, he'll be returning and playing against the Texans. Everyone except DeShaun Watson says DeShaun Watson is remorseful in his actions. Did you hear that? Everyone except for him says that he is remorseful in his actions, because he's standing by his innocence, claiming that he didn't do anything at all. But again, I say, if you didn't do anything, stand by that. I'm just saying you're going to stand by, but stand by that. And if you didn't do anything, why are you settling these suits? Okay. The NFL still made sure to get Watson back on the field just in time to face Houston, as the TV ratings likely will soar. So the discipline here is arguably insignificant, but it still feels empty. And that's due to his lack of remorse in this situation. You can look at the Browns and you see that they never really cared what was going on. They just wanted to make a trade to get DeShaun Watson. He truly believes that he didn't do anything wrong, despite facing multiple forms of discipline. The league just wanted to get him back on the field to face his former team. The NFL might want this story to be over, but anyone following knows how gross it all feels. And I am one, yes, who also feels that way. Like I said, in my thought process and in my interpretation of this entire thing, when you get to the point where you're settling suits and you are giving apologies because people are probably arguably telling you this is what you need to do to save face, you kind of take everything with a couple grains of salt, if you will. In a negotiated settlement, the rule, like we said, we know what he's got. He got the 11-game suspension, $5 million fine, and he has to undergo mandatory counseling. The initial stage of the NFL wanted an indefinite suspension, with him having to reapply for reinstatement, which is not the particular case in this punishment. They wanted it to be indefinite, where he would have an extended period of time to sit out, and then he would have to formally to be reinstated into the NFL. Okay, that didn't happen. His camp was sticking to their party line, that he had done nothing wrong, and they wanted no discipline, which was definitely not going to happen at all. Of course, there was definitely going to be some discipline in this situation. Amazingly, Watson continues to show no remorse. He says he made a couple of perfunctory statements about the women he impacted last weekend. In his press conference following the settlement, he maintained he had not disrespected women. This article says he settled 23 of the lawsuits, and the Texans again settled another 30. So again, we have the settling. Okay, again, where I mentioned to you that there would be a gain. It could be a benefit or a profit. So it all comes down to the CBA. The CBA, as it has determined the final penalty here as much as anything. Okay, with the NFL, as usual, playing from a position of strength. In 2020, Roger Goodell went from being the judge and the jury and executioner to simply the appellate judge. Okay, but that's basically the same thing. Okay, Goodell sat back and appealed with a hand-picked appeal officer who now is spared from making a ruling. He's spared from making a ruling. Okay. There was a lot of talk about Watson's legal team taking a ruling from Harvey to court. That, of course, will not happen now. If they had done so, they would have eventually lost. And we know that. We went through some stuff before. Like they say, as in the Tom Brady case. Sympathetic to Watson, but appellate courts have no such fealty. Tom Brady lost. Ezekiel Elliott lost. Adrian Peterson lost. And DeShaun Watson definitely would have lost. So now we get into the biggest part of the entire thing. And this also ties into what I said to you with DeShaun's Watson initial statement, where he said he needs to continue on with his life and his future. Okay? The Watson team had a strong financial incentive to avoid a year-long suspension. He would have told the contract, freezing it in place to resume next year. Okay? So if they had went through the legal thing and all of this, everything going through, the 5-year contract would have become a 6-year contract. And most dramatically, Watson would have made only a $1 million salary scheduled for this year in 2023. The goal of not tolling the contract was accomplished by the Watson team. Okay, so here's the total loss from Deshaun Watson's contract for his pattern of predatory behavior. $650,000. That's it. Instead of $230 million, he'll now make $229.35 million. Pause for a second to let that marinate for you guys. Let you guys marinate on that for a second. He lost $650,000 basically in the entire contract. In the two contracts negotiated for high-level quarterbacks since Watson, Kyler Murray and them did not do it. Yada Lamar Jackson is coming up next, so he would be the staple, if you will, of these newfangled contracts and how much things will be differentiated. On the behavioral side, we know the president of a team, the Browns, protecting a player financially from loss of income due to a pending suspension. But the question is whether there will be a situation like this where a star player is picking a team in the way that Watson did. If you remember, way back in the beginning, the Cleveland Browns were not on his list. When he was just a disgruntled employee before all of these allegations came out, he wanted to be traded. The Cleveland Browns were not on his list. Okay, so in essence, the icky part becomes that he profited off his own behavior. He had demanded a trade, but it was his misconduct that caused his former team, the Texans, to agree to disassociate from him. So again, like we said, he was under contract. They didn't have to trade him, but it got to the point where they just couldn't take any more, and then they decided to disassociate with him. A lot of people feel the suspension is light, and the NFL did impose its will. While it feels like the NFL won the battle, Watson's financial win and lack of remorse make it seem as though they lost the war here. He will return in November. We'll have 4 more seasons under the contract with the Browns, and that was always their goal, to extend that contract and make sure that he got paid, and which is what they succeeded in doing. So all in all, it's profitable for the defendant. It could turn out to be profitable or beneficial for the NFL due to the fact that the timing of the suspension, the number of games, and when he returns, and who the opponent will be that he will face when he does return. So folks, listen, you have to take all of this, like I said, with a grain of salt, because again, we'll never know what truly happened. We can only speculate for the most part, but you can also, with everything that went on and everything that has been said, you can also feel that there is a lot of truth to these allegations. We'll probably never know the truth to all these allegations, because these women will probably, like a lot of them have settled, so they probably got settled, and they probably have a gag order where they can't talk about it because they got paid, they got settled. The last woman, we don't know. She may eventually get to the point where she will be ready to talk about what happened and speak on what happened and then expose everything. And then you got a whole Pandora's box that could be opened at some point, possibly. But it all depends on how this final plaintiff goes about these things, goes about this issue where she has not accepted the payoff, the settlement. And who knows if they'll try to reach out again and try to get her to take a settlement another time, somewhere down the line, for fear that she may eventually get to the point where she will expose everything that happened to her, and then that will allude to possibly some other women retracting and coming out and talking about what happened to them. So we look at the situation and we look at DeShaun Watson, and like I said, the biggest issue for me is the simple fact that he is not showing any remorse. Um, Not condoning, definitely not condoning what he did. Of course, I feel some type of way about that because women should not be treated in that manner, regardless of whether you're a professional athlete, regular Joe, or whatever. Women should not be treated the way that these women were allegedly treated. These women were doing their job, the job that helps them take care of themselves and their families. And for him to act the way he acted allegedly is disrespectful and uncalled for. I don't feel like any woman should have to be degraded in any type of way, especially at that level. Like it kind of feels like you have a young man who has star status as a professional athlete, and he's getting to these women, and it's like, oh well, they massages. I can throw this here and do this and do that. They're not gonna say anything. It probably won't happen, but it did, and somebody said something, and it came out. It always comes things always, they say things always come back full circle. So just this particular situation is in that realm as well, where I told you about a lot, or I've talked about a lot of these professional athletes, more so in football than any other sport, where these young men come from the southern region of the country. Some of them come from very small towns who could only dream of being able to do some of the things that they can now. And then they get to that level and then they feel like they're untouchable. This could very well fit in that realm, in that circle, because now he feels like, oh, well, I'm DeShaun Watson and I can do what I want. This lady's here, she get it. But again, for my thoughts and my feelings, these women should not have been degraded like they were allegedly degraded. Again, they were doing their job, doing what they get compensated for, to take care of themselves and take care of their family, to provide a service for a professional athlete. And for things to make a turn the way that they did in this situation is just uncalled for. And then it just adds insult to injury, where after he settled these suits, where he's showing no remorse. And he could have been showing no remorse before these suits came up. But for him to not show any remorse, it gives you, it kind of rubs you the wrong way. It makes you feel like he really doesn't care. Like, all right, it is what it is. Whatever happened, happened, and that's what it is. I don't care. That's the kind of vibe that you get from this situation when you hear those words, that he has no remorse, or he's showing no remorse in this situation. Not a good look for you, Mr. Watson. Not a good look at all. Because you're in that limelight. And like I tell you guys a lot, when you're in that limelight as a star, you have to be cautious of everything you do, every move you make. I mean, it could be something as simple as you going to the supermarket. Someone is going to recognize you when you're out. It's just that simple. Enough people watch TV, enough people hear things, and enough people see you. And again, I reiterate, they may not know who you specifically are, but a lot more times than not, people can look in certain situations and certain persons and say, oh, yeah, he's a professional athlete. He does something. And it may not be the case 100%, but a lot of times it does turn out to be someone of that professional athletic nature, or a celebrity or something like that. So when you're in that limelight, like I tell you guys all the time, you definitely have to be careful of what you do, and watch what you do, and watch your surroundings, and be totally aware of your surroundings at all times. And like I just mentioned, it could be something as simple as going to the supermarket. I mean, look at the Ray Lewis situation. Let's digress for a second. Look at the the Ray Rice situation in Atlantic City. People from all over come to Atlantic City. They come to gamble, they come to go to the beach, they enjoy the boardwalk. you look at Ray Rice walking around Atlantic City, and of course, like I mentioned to people when this situation was prevalent, somebody knew who he was. He maybe couldn't call his exact name, but somebody knew. Oh yeah, he's a professional football player. I've seen him before. I just can't call his name, but I've seen him before. Because when you see these games and you see these players, especially in football, when they're on the sideline, they got their helmets off so you can see their faces. And when you're a prominent player like Ray Rice, people tend to see your face a lot more than some of the others, so people can get a read on who you are. And again, like I said, they may not remember your name exactly, but they can easily say, oh, that's the dude that just ran for 200 yards last week on the Ravens, right? Yeah. We know who he is. And they may not call his name, like I said, but somebody will recognize you. And that situation went the way it went. And now you have this situation where it's like a continuing cycle that needs to be halted. It needs to be impeded. And I don't know how much more the NFL will do as far as discipline, because in the long run, even with discipline, there's still a gain for the NFL. Like I just mentioned to you in this situation, you look at the way he's coming back. Okay, he's going to be allowed to just come back. There's no situation where it was indefinite, where he had to apply to come back, which has been done to other players. But it's like when they went through this appeal and they looked at the schedules and they said, oh, 6 games, these couple games may not mean anything. But when he comes back in this week, he'll be playing the Texans, the team that he just went through it with, team that got rid of him, and yada yada yada, and all that stuff. And then also you could easily say, like I mentioned to some people when we talked about it, they asked me like, well, what about? I said, well, what kind of impact could that now have on the Browns? Where in the beginning stages they thought, oh, we're going to get DeShaun Watson. It's an upgrade from Baker Mayfield. We made the playoffs. We may just have a better chance than what we had last year. So he's going to miss 11 games. And at that point, playoff implications could be involved there. Another reason why the NFL arguably let him come back at this particular point. But again, what does that do to the Cleveland Browns, or to the state of the Cleveland Browns at that point? It could have them on the outside looking in as far as the playoffs, or it could have them in contention, which I don't think it will have them in contention, because without DeShaun Watson, I heard rumors that they were looking at Jimmy G. No confirmation on that yet. But think about that situation. What will this do to the state of the Cleveland Browns? It could make this fine suspension could make or break their season. It could very well have a huge impact on the season that the Browns have coming up. So all in all, again, like I said, I feel some type of way about him not having any remorse in this situation. The NFL did what they did. They appealed. They made the suspension. They upgraded it to 5 more games, gave him a $5 million suspension. So they felt like they've done something. And a lot of people still feel like that's not enough. For me, for one, I still am on the fence about whether that's enough or whether it's not enough, because of the way I feel about the treatment of women. So I'm trying to stay away from giving a read on that, really, about how I feel about the suspension factor of, is it enough or not enough, because I could very well be biased in my opinions on that, or my thought process on that. So I'm going to stay away from that for now. Folks, it is now 11:42, 42 minutes past the 11 a.m. hour. I am going to take my first break. When I come back, I am going to talk a little bit about the LIV and the PGA. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the situation with Dennis Rodman, who is intending and were planning to go to Russia to speak on behalf of, and possibly to, Britney Griner, and somehow create a possibility where she could be released. Folks, it's your boy, Sports Rap D. On the other side, coming up, got some more stuff for you. Stay tuned. I'll be right back with you. He's here. So listen, we talked about DeShaun Watson, and now we are going to get back into some Britney Griner topics, some Britney Griner talk. As I reported, Dennis Rodman is set to. Dennis Rodman is set to go to Russia, or is planning to go to Russia to speak on behalf of and possibly with Britney Griner in attempts to facilitate a release of her from prison. I talked about this a while back, and I felt like some other people needed to get over there and talk to her, and it's a good thing that Dennis Rodman is doing. He says he's got permission to go to Russia to help that girl. He said, I'm trying to go this week. Okay, so again, his heart and his mind are in the right place. Like I spoke with Latasha Richardson on Thursday during our interview series, we both agreed that 9 years was harsh, but we also agreed that it's a strong possibility that she could be being used as an example. And like I mentioned to you all when this thing first started, that I hoped that she did not become a pawn in this entire situation, and thus here we are. Okay, so if you didn't know, she got 9 years, and it was for vape pen. And we went through some stuff last week. You can go back to vote. The audio is up on iHeart, Google Podcast, but you can go back there, or you can scroll through Facebook and find that video and see what we talked about on Thursday to get some information on that. But again, you know, when you see a star like Dennis Rodman, and although a lot of people will say he's somewhat strange, he's still a star, and he has already had an impact on some situations in China. So maybe it's a good thing that he's going to get over there and talk to her. Maybe he can help. I'm hoping that he can help, again, because like I also agree that 9 years is somewhat harsh for her, for the situation that she put herself in. But again, we have to think about where she is and the way things are run over there. Like I mentioned several times, when people here in the States are looking at this situation, they're automatically thinking the judicial system, and they're thinking the way it runs in America. Doesn't run the same in Russia. So a lot of the laws there are stricter for things that could be a slap on the wrist here, are a little bit more strict over there. So it's good to see that Dennis Rodman is up and about and willing to go over there and talk to her and possibly facilitate a release. It's a great thing. I hope something comes to fruition. I wish him all the best in his travels and his efforts to do this, and hopefully we can have something done and Britney Griner can come home and continue her livelihood, because her livelihood is being stalled. She's a professional athlete and she can't participate right now, so her compensation, her funding, her finances are being pretty much halted in a way that no professional athlete would ever truly expect to happen. So I want to get into a little bit on the LIV and the PGA situation. This is going to be an ongoing situation, I believe, because the LIV has poached quite a few members of the PGA, and it's gotten under the skin of some of the players, more specifically Rory McIlroy and Tiger Woods, who feel like the defectors are abandoning the agent or agency that basically put them on the map. In essence, an argument made them who they are today, and now they're turning their back on it for higher compensation. Another thing that's bugging these guys is the fact that they will never and don't ever want to admit that it's about the money, which when we talked about it and we found out how much the purses were for these guys, I mean, you got guys that are coming in last place that are winning like almost like $250,000, almost $500,000, and you're coming in last place. Like, who wouldn't go for that? The issue is just admit it. Like, save face, be truthful to the situation and be truthful to yourself, and admit the real reason that you defected to the LIV. We don't know how long this is going to last either. They could have one run at this. I mean, it's a lot of mixed views about their situations and how those things are run. If you notice, you haven't seen anything on TV. You haven't really seen any advertising about any of their events. You just hear about them when they happen and when they're over. As opposed to, like we said, with the PGA, who was plugged in to TV time, things of that nature. You always heard about whatever PGA event was coming up. It was broadcast, it was advertised. Nothing resembling any of that coming from the LIV. Like the biggest thing you hear is the fact that these guys are getting paid a lot more. And it's really beginning to get under the skin of some of the other players who did not defect. And they have a real issue with it. So Tiger Woods and Rory McIlroy are leading a group that for the PGA that is wanting to start a circuit of 18 events that will hopefully re-emerge or replace the PGA back at the top. Because right now it's not really looking too good. But, you know, the PGA, in my opinion, has a little bit more background to stand on than the LIV. Like this LIV thing, you just got a bunch of, in essence, you have a bunch of Saudi or a bunch of Arabians or whatever that have the money to facilitate and pay these guys, and they're just doing it. And it seems like in spite of what the PGA has done for so long, and now they have poached a lot of the big name players from the PGA, which they thought would propel them to something that it has not propelled them to as of yet. So again, we still don't know if it will propel to something. We don't know if it's going to fall by the wayside. But what the issue is the fact that none of these guys are willing to have defected or willing to admit that they are going for the money. And we all know it's for the money because we've seen it. And I've talked about it to you guys. I've told you about the prizes, the purses that are being set for these LIV tournaments. And it's way more than what these guys would get in the PGA. But the PGA was established, long running established, if you will. And again, like I meant, they have a leg to stand on. They have the background to stand on more so than the PGA. And what the PGA did to protect themselves was they banned these guys. So there's a strong chance that if the LIV fails, then what do these guys do? Can't go back to the PGA because the PGA is not having it. You left, you wanted to get more money, do something with that money or whatever. Find somewhere else to go. They're banned, they're not letting them back in. So it's hard to say what will happen with the LIV golf. And like I said, we know the PGA is going to be around. There's up and coming players that could be in the PGA that could be propelled to the top, that could make some money in the PGA and become faces of the PGA when some of these other guys leave. And then you could also argue that if the LIV falls by the wayside, then these guys could be left out in the cold. So I'll definitely keep my ears to the story, keep my ears to the street, and let you know what could happen or what will happen when I find out if anything happens with the LIV and the PGA. And again, like I said, Tiger Woods and Rory McIlroy are very, very big in this fight to bring back some oomph, if you will, or something to the PGA. So on to the announcements, folks. Shout out to my guy Joe Richmond, the ambassador of basketball for your Delaware Bluecoats. And in that, we've got some open tryouts, and I'm going to post all this stuff too, so don't worry if you miss it by me saying it a little bit too fast or whatever. It'll all be posted later today. The worst, it'll be posted tomorrow, but it will be posted and you'll be able to get to it. So the Bluecoats are having an open tryout on September the 10th from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. at Chase Fieldhouse, and then September 24th from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. at Delaware State University. Also, there's a mini camp for the kids on this weekend coming up, August 27th and 28th. Saturdays times are 9 to 1. Sundays times are 10 to 12. For boys and girls ages 13 to 18, it's $75 per camper. You get a workout tee and tickets to a game also at the Chase Fieldhouse. And then Sunday, I'm kind of double dipping here. So shout outs also to my guy, Ivan Mighty Robinson, who has a fighter, I think maybe 1 or 2 fighters on this card. September 17th, boxing at the Fieldhouse. So I'm doing this for both of my guys. It's a D-League promotion. General admission tickets are $30. You can get tickets on Eventbrite. And just check them out. Like, listen, I think it's the first time they're having boxing at the field house. So check them out. And again, like I mentioned to you, like I said, I will post all of that stuff on my social media when I get the first opportunity to do so. So another thing that I saw, and I thought that this was somewhat funny, considering what we talked about a few weeks ago about the investigation of the Sixers and their alleged tampering, and we know how that works out. We know tampering goes on all across the NBA, and we know how it does. Every team does it. This is 9 reasons it's clear that the NBA still hates the process. Number 9, they scheduled the Sixers 2 tough games this coming season. First game opening night against the Boston Celtics, the defending Eastern Conference champions, and then game 2 days later against the Milwaukee Bucks, which actually the game 2 against the Milwaukee is the home opener. So they've got 2 tough games right out of the gate. Okay, right out of the gate they got 2 tough games. So it's kind of like they're saying, oh, okay, they made these moves. We already investigating them. Let's see what they do. Let's give them these 2 tough opponents. And opponents who you can arguably say have been thorns in our side for the past couple years. Okay? But now, what it feels like to me is the process is producing something and they're being tested. As far as Sixers are, they're being tested by the NBA to see if this works, if it has an issue, if there's an issue, or if it works and how it will work. And again, like I said, they're making it tough. They're not making it easy for them. Also, the beginning of the schedule isn't ideal for a team with key additions. And what that means is they have players who are coming in that have to get familiarized with their new team. You got 3 or 4 new players coming in, which is very tough. Even though you do have a training camp, it's going to take a few games in the mix to get this thing rolling with these new additions. So that's also one of the reasons there. Number 6, the Sixers have 13 back-to-backs, which is a lot of wear and tear on the body. We saw the issues with Joel Embiid, what they said was tired. We saw the issues with James Harden and his hamstring. Hopefully he has been working, and I've seen him working, so hopefully that work will continue. Hopefully the Sixers can do some things and be in a position, do a lot of these back-to-backs where these guys can play and it won't affect them much. Their strength of schedule also is an issue for them right now in this whole situation. The Sixers' final stretch is like murder's row. So it's a lot of tough games in their final stretch for their season and their schedule this year. They're helping the tankers tank. Really don't understand that one right there, how that is associated with the process. But again, I think it's the fear that something is being facilitated with the progress. Then we've got rivalry week where they're putting this big show on between Joel Embiid and Nikola Jokic, who were 1 and 2 in the MVP race the last 2 years, and Joel falling to number 2 in both years. In my opinion, last season should have been his year to win it, but hopefully he can do some things with his new additions and his help and get to the point where he can win the MVP. But he has also stated very early in the offseason that he's not really concerned with that now. He says it is what it is. He's just worried about focused on winning and trying to win the championship. Last thing is going to blend numbers 4 and 3, start a list and call it a process punishment. And on this list, again, just to remind you, 4 and 3 were the final stretch, which is tough for the Sixers heading into the playoffs, and then helping the tankers tank. So there is still some ongoing issues with the Sixers and the process, and I think what it is like I said, the fear of the situation that something is now coming to fruition. The same way I felt about the situation with Sean Marks having his comments, and then all of a sudden there's now an investigation of the Sixers as far as tampering. But we know tampering goes on all the time. I explained it to you in those shows when that was actually prevalent, and it's died down somewhat, hasn't really been talked about much. So that leads me to believe that they're not finding anything there. They're just disappointed that the Sixers took a route. They dubbed it the process, or the media and the fans dubbed it the process. And it's now beginning to look like something is working. Well, it's beginning to look like that whole situation is beginning to work, where they're cleaning up some things that went on during the process. And now they're to the point where they have some things in place where they have improved and they could be better and they could pose some or make some noise in the NBA this upcoming season. So, folks, it's one of those things where, ongoing, as far as Philly natives and Philly teams, we always feel the hate. There's always hate for us. But underlying fact for me is I think that's a lot of love that people won't admit, because you always find people who allegedly root for other teams, and they always have something to say about what the Sixers do and don't do, whether the Sixers win or the Eagles win or don't win. But you never really hear them go into any in-depth conversations about the team that they allegedly like, which seems kind of funny to me. So it's all like that says in that song, no one likes us, no one likes us, we don't care. We're from Philly, you know what, Philly. And it goes on like that. So we're going to do what we do. Fans, I think the fans are just passionate. Again, I do have some flaws with the fans here. Some of the fans, they want the immediate gratification, which doesn't always happen. But again, the fans here are very knowledgeable and very passionate about their sports teams. And you have this situation where they went one route that was a little unorthodox for some executives in the NBA and other teams around the NBA. And, they kind of put the target on their back as far as the Sixers, and things are where they are right now. Folks, I am going to wrap up right now, a little early today. But I think I covered everything I needed to cover. In fact, I'm sure I covered everything I needed to cover. Like I said, you can catch me every Monday right here on Heat 100 Radio. You can catch me on social media. Facebook, Sports Rap Podcast is the group page. On Instagram and Twitter, it is at sportsrap_D. The webpage, sportsrapradio.com. You can get all of this audio on iHeart, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and more. And please, folks, remember to get over to the YouTube channel, Sports Rap TV. Click the like on the above videos that you like, that thumbs up. Then you hit that subscribe button to make sure you subscribe to the channel. And also hit the bell to make sure you are alerted when new video or new content is up and running. Before I go, I'm going to give you schedules for today, Monday, August 22nd, 2022. Major League Baseball, you got the White Sox and the Guardians. The Mets and the Phillies close out a series, the weekend series today. The Blue Jays and the Yankees, the Astros and the Braves, the Reds and the Pirates, the Royals and the Rays, the Angels and the Tigers, the Rangers and the Twins, the Brewers and the Cubs, the Giants and the Rockies, the Mariners and the A's, the Marlins and the Dodgers, the Cards and the Diamondbacks, the Nationals and the Padres, the Red Sox, and are in Baltimore to face the Orioles. Tuesday, WNBA playoffs resume. The Aces are at the Mercury, the Sky, and the Liberty face off, and those are closeout games in both of those series, game 3. Tonight, NFL preseason football, Falcons and Jets. As always, folks, be great on purpose. Look out for me on social media. I will have all those announcements that I mentioned about the Blue Coats and the boxing at the Chase Fieldhouse. Shout outs to everyone that tuned in this morning. Shout outs to everyone that tunes in all the time and follows on social media. Again, as always, I definitely appreciate the support. And finally, before we close out, we are just about 2 weeks away. 2 weeks away. I'm holding them up right now. So give it a second. It's a little delay, but it's coming up. Fish Fry tickets, September the 4th, 2022. The Sunday before Labor Day. Get your tickets. They are going fast. It's heating up now. As you know, a lot of people wait till the last minute. Tickets are $15 in advance. They are more at the door. Okay. Also celebrating our 8-year anniversary for Heat 100 Radio. Birthday for Heat 100 owns Rock the Barber, Rock Hair Forever, and an artist showcase. So we are doing what we do, giving to the community, giving people opportunities, giving people a chance. There may even be some prize money up for grabs that day. So make sure you get your tickets. You can see me. Hit me up on Instagram, like I said, at sportsrap_D DM, or message me in the group page on Facebook, Sports Rap Podcast, to let me know how many tickets you need, and I will give you payment options at that particular time. Folks, again, be great on purpose. Enjoy this Monday. It's a little cloudy, little rainy, but it's going to be a good day. So get you some of this liquid sunshine. Stay tuned all week, and I'll be right back here next Monday, live on air with you. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Enjoy your Monday. Peace.